Cinemondo podcast with Kathy, Mark, and Bert, talking about movies, horror, sci-fi, unusual, unknown, forgotten, underappreciated, always interesting. How is everybody?
We're doing good.
Good.
How are you? Everybody looks so good.
Oh my God, we're fabulous right now.
We've always been fabulous.
We're fabulous.
So what are we going to talk about today? What's on the docket?
Well, I think we're going to talk about a movie that's not quite the same kind of movie we normally talk about, right?
There's no blood and gore, deaths.
That was my only complaint.
There's some monsters in it, though.
There are monsters.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting film that we saw a pre-release screener, and it was it's from, what is it, Shout?
Yeah, Shout Factory. Our friends at Shout. Yes,
it's a very classy, cool movie.
Yeah,
it's also a very broad audience. I think a lot of people will like it, unlike a lot of our movies are a little, niche-y.
Yeah, it's
niche.
It's kind of it's almost like a thriller in a way, because I was thinking, and even the characters in the film at one point say it's like a heist.
Yeah.
But the film is called Misbehavior.
Yeah,
it's the British style spelling.
Yes, it's a British drama / comedy / historical film that's based on the 1970 Miss World pageant that happened in Britain, and it stars Keira Knightley, Greg Kinnear as Bob Hope.
That was weird.
Yeah.
I didn't know who he was at first. I was like, who's this guy supposed to be? And then I finally figured out it was Bob Hope.
Jessie Buckley, who's a really good Irish actress. Gugu Mbatha-Raw, who we like very much from Fast Colors, and of course that great Black Mirror episode, San Junipero.
Yeah.
So it's a really good cast. Reese Witherspoon, I think is his last name, but you've seen him before in a lot of movies. So it's a really wonderful cast, really well directed by Philippa Lowthorpe, who has done a lot of stuff, including Game of Thrones, Kathy?
No. She did The Third Day.
The Third Day.
Yeah, new Jude Law series. She also shot a bunch of episodes of The Crown, which I love.
She directed
She directed all these. So that's very cool, female director. And this is a feature film that she did in between all her TV work. And I think, it was the right choice of director for the right project, I think, on this film, since it's sort of about an early sort of feminist movement in Britain.
Kind of the origins of that kind of thing, which is really interesting to see, because it's not something that you learn about in school all the time. And yet it's a hugely important era in the development of civilization, I think, and it's sort of like a it's like a rebellion that needed to happen. And it points out some things, that it's called misbehavior, I think, because that word is a word that's used against people sometimes. Like when you do something you're not supposed to do, you're misbehaving, you're not behaving.
Well, especially toward women.
Yeah.
There are very strict, boundaries on how women are supposed to behave.
Right.
And especially in the 70s, when you're talking about, a pageant, a beauty pageant, which I find, they get more and more repellent as time goes by to me, even though they try and frame them as being about like how, it's promoting careers and talent. It still boils down to what it is, which doesn't seem like it has a place in society anymore to me. And I think, certain people have kind of pretty much ruined the beauty pageant, TV shows these days. But it's interesting to see it because it is back in a time when they were still kind of a legit, technically a legit sort of form of entertainment that people didn't really feel bad about enjoying. And so it took this younger generation of women to start pointing it out, to like, this is not right. This is not good to do this to women, to objectify them like this. And that's sort of basically the unfun sounding premise of a very fun movie.
Yeah.
Well, you have to remember it's 1970, and it's Miss World was one of the biggest things and biggest television events back then. It was like over 100 million people watched the Miss World pageant. And back then it was just, they could have said all those things about, class and this and that, but they're still in bathing suits. They're still walking around in short little outfits. And in the early, one of the characters who kind of puts the pageant on it, he's just, he's looking at these women and saying, oh, she's got a nice, nice legs and she's got a pretty face and blah, blah, blah. I mean, that's what it was about back then.
Yeah. It's like,
Bottom
turn
line.
around, let me get a better look at you. It's I kind of wish the film they did do a scene near the end where they tried to sort of say, it wasn't all bad because maybe it did empower some girls. They had the winner she sort of justifies it a bit in that restroom scene at the end, the ladies' room, where she's talking to Keira Knightley's character, and she says, well, I did this because I know that there's a lot of little girls who look like me who now maybe are inspired to get more from their lives or whatever. But I think it was a little bit misguided because the whole rest of the movie was about how empty that idea is. But then I guess they sort of wanted to make sure that we knew that, there is something empowering about it, I guess, when somebody can achieve something that wasn't achieved by a person of her race before. Yeah. And Keira Knightley had achieved something that someone from her gender had not achieved before, and it was like they were protesting against the objectification of women, and then you find out, oh, well, there's also a racial element to this too, where it's like now that a non-white woman has won this thing, you get you have a lot of non-white young girls who are seeing it and maybe thinking, I can do things, I can do anything,
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's one of those sort of, in many ways, it's one of those kind of feel-good British films, kind of British comedies. We've all seen them, whether it's the Full Monty, or there's so many of them.
Right.
It's about like, at the end, it's kind of, there's an uplifting message, there's a feel-good message. It's an up film, but of course, there's a lot of serious stuff going on in it. So yeah, that kind of film has to sort of, it doesn't want to be too preachy. It also has to understand this is 50 years ago. So it's just a different feel. And I think they're trying to keep it like, this is not 2020 people talking. This is 1970 women's lib just starting in England, just figuring it out. So I think they sort of captured that pretty good, and I think they did a really good job, like Bob Hope doesn't come off as, Mr. Fantastic in this movie,
he's pretty bad. And it's like, that's the way a lot of guys were back then. It was sort of the accepted way that, you can get away with whatever you want,
Mm-hmm.
And men sort of abused that power, and they were I've heard tell of celebrities saying that they can do whatever they want because they're a star, and that mentality in association with the, Miss World, Miss Universe, Miss Galaxy, or whatever. It's basically a way for, this sounds awful, but this is what it is. I think it's a way for guys to get a whole bunch of beautiful women together and see them parade around in swimsuits and judge them.
Ogle them. Yeah,
she's better than that one. She's better than that one. And it's like, why are they better? Because, she looks better in a swimsuit or something.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was.
But I feel like in this movie, they could have made their case for it being something more for young girls to be inspired by if they had their little speeches, because they always, I guess they would throw this in there, they would say, what is your hope for the future of mankind? Or they'd ask them a question like that, like, if you had one wish for the world, what would it be? And a lot of times that, the stereotype is that they would say, oh, I want world peace. But sometimes the women in these competitions would give a little speech that was like, wow, that was okay. She's smart and she's got something to say. She's not just sort of going through it just to get the crown, and that.
But see, that wasn't required though. Like, the thing is, I don't think that happened that often because I don't think a lot of the women felt like that was necessarily what any of the pageant, judges were looking for. They weren't looking for smart women.
But didn't they do that back then? Didn't they give them like other, like to show your talent or to show, to give a speech about something, or I mean, I remember that from watching them when I
70s.
was a kid.
Yeah, but that also the American ones. But I think part of it too is that I think they're trying to kind of streamline the idea that this was about how the sort of systemic objectification of women was basically portrayed in its purest form in the beauty pageant. Men got to watch,
Yeah.
mostly men got to watch these women and judge them purely on their physical appearance. Yeah, they might have thrown in like a talent portion or tell me your dreams or hopes or whatever, but that was to me was the veil that they try to put in front of the incredibly sexist, gross objectification of women. But even then, it was sort of, even women accepted it then. They thought it was okay. Like they incorporate that into the film, how Keira Knightley's mother was like, I like the beauty pageants.
And her little girl with the putting on the lipstick and stuff and posing and everything. It was kind of sad. You're like, oh, that's sad. That's the little girl's idea of what's, a wonderful way for a girl to aspire.
Well, and the saddest thing I thought about is how the conversation just hasn't changed that much. I mean, when you're watching this is from 50 years ago, like you said, and women are still trying to be taken seriously. And the things women were saying and the way the beauty pageant was used as like their basic construct for this conversation is exactly the same now about how women are expected to behave, what they're expected to say, how they're supposed to look. I mean, there's still a lot of pressure on women on how they look. And it's like, that's the kind of conversation that we've been having for 50 years. And it's still happening. And why we even still have beauty pageants, I don't know.
But there's parts of here in the United States. I mean, it's pageant central. We know, that's they just kids at the John Benet Ramseys of the world. The children that are age 4 and 5 are dressed up to look. The makeup and the hair. That's just But I think Miss World was really about. It didn't even, I don't think even had those sections where there's a lot of questions, like, the latter pageants, like the Miss USA pageants, where they would try to say, okay, what's your thoughts and blah, blah, blah. And it was more just like, who is the prettiest woman in the world?
Right.
Yeah.
That was the pageant. It's like,
because I'm remembering the ones where they would say, Miss Georgia is an entrepreneur who started her own business and all those kind of things where that was kind of, okay. I mean, if you had but then again, even if you were just judging people on their successes in business, that's still also kind of objectifying people, I mean, I'm the guy who doesn't even like the Academy Awards. So, I mean, any kind of competition where one person is, especially when it involves art or movies or something like that, and especially where it involves a person's physical appearance or their how much money they have or whatever, those kind of competitions are just kind of icky to me. I don't know.
But I think overall the film, I mean, let's not give it the impression that this is this downer movie. I think
we're kind of raging because it brings up an idea. But the movie itself is, I mean, I love the wardrobe is amazing because the time 1970s in Britain is amazing looking. And, I love Keira Knightley being kind of a nerd. Like she was kind of this kind of ho-hum, drab for Keira Knightley. But I loved how everybody was dressed really cool. I loved the feminist group was so good.
Yeah.
I mean, they were so fun and quirky. I loved them so much.
What is the actress who was the, I think she's an Irish actress.
Jessie Buckley.
The kind of curly hair.
Yes.
She is great. Yeah.
So
she was.
great.
Well, she's also in that Charlie Kaufman movie, which I'm trying to get you. Oh, you didn't watch it. You couldn't stand it. Right?
I watched the first 10 minutes and nope.
Okay.
I mean, maybe I should try and finish it. We can have a podcast about that.
We can talk about it. But she's with the
I'm dreading the animal stuff, so I'm having a hard time with it.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
But what's interesting about this is in Britain, and it's it takes place in 1970 or 71 or 2 or 3?
70. Yeah.
70.
70.
So it's less than a decade away from punk rock, and you're kind of seeing, there's like the angsty street mentality that's kind of coming up in the 70s, which I think was kind of people were getting past the peace and love, flower power, everything is beautiful of the 60s, and starting to realize, things. We still have some work to do. It's not all about peace and love and everybody's getting along perfectly because we're all groovy, man. It's like, nah, there's still problems. And things are still kind of dark in the world. There was still some issues that needed to be resolved and still need to be resolved. But I think that was kind of, when you look at those people and you think about what they were doing and how they were rebelling and what they were rebelling against, it's very punk rock, It's kind of like the early moments of that kind of rebellion. But the feminist movement was, that's the wrong word for it, but it was kind of like punk rock, the way they were like, you're not going to take any of your nonsense anymore. We're going to
criticizing the norms, trying to point out where, it's unfair to people who aren't just white men. A lot of it's, the corporate acceptance of, labeling people and, where they're supposed to fit into this structure, the patriarchal system. It's, it's like, it's still a problem.
Well, it's creating a movement, with the flyers and the there was like a look to it, and they printed their own flyers, and they had it was a scene, they created a scene, and it still resonates. I love that idea that people can get together in their little apartments and get a silk screen and print some stuff and change the world.
Well, I thought it was a perfect continuation from like the 60s where the mods and the groups like the Kinks and all that kind of stuff. These are those kids growing up a little bit, and they're realizing, hey, it's not just flower power here in England. It's that angsty rage that English kids had, and very kind of tough. And I thought Jessie Buckley's character and that whole group sort of captured that perfectly.
Yeah.
So it was a great mix of them, and then Keira Knightley, sort of nerdish, smarty pants, and then go from there. And it sort of like brings everybody in together. And it just was, I found it really super enjoyable and fun. Yeah. And it had, but there is these messages that are important. Yeah. But go in there and it's just a feel good, fun British kind of comedy drama. That's like so many other ones that are always easy to watch and fun to watch and well made.
Yeah,
we should play the trailer so people get a taste of the tone, because it's not this downer tone. It has a message, but it's actually very fun. It's technically a comedy. So let's play that trailer real quick.
Last year, 100 million people tuned in live to Miss World. More viewers than for the moon landings or the World Cup final.
Beautiful, darling.
Mum, don't.
You and your sisters used to love playing Miss World.
We also like to eat our own snot. We really believe beauty isn't just skin deep. The girls also have charm, grace, good deportment.
Swimsuits.
Miss World rehearsals are underway.
I'm the first Black South African to take part.
I'm the first Miss Grenada.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Bob Hope.
The last time Bob guested on this show, he brought the winning girl home with him.
They're turning oppression into spectacle. Let's make a spectacle of our own. We'd infiltrate the theatre.
We've just been smoking and watching, like in a heist film.
If I win, there will be little girls who might start to believe they have a place in the world.
We're black. We're not going to be Miss World.
You don't own me.
I don't want you to think I'm some kind of brute that doesn't consider the feelings of women. I consider feeling women all the time.
Get this.
Tonight may be the start of something, Bob.
This competition makes us compete with each other and makes the world narrower for all of us in the end. Why should any woman have to earn her place in the world by looking a particular way? You don't. He doesn't. Why should we?
Not so bad.
And I think it's actually it's available streaming right now, I believe. So through Shout Factory. So it's you should check it out for a fun 2 hours and really good acting, and it's just well made, it's top to bottom.
And like you said, it's not preachy. It's not too preachy. Don't expect that you're going to have a finger wagged in your face, or anything like that. It's not like down on men or anything. It's down on certain kinds of men, which it needs to be. But I thought it was.
What'd you think of Greg Kinnear's performance? He plays Bob Hope.
I thought he was sort of the weakest link, to be honest. I mean, I like Greg Kinnear. He's done some really good stuff. And I've always liked Bob Hope. But, you hear things about Bob Hope. It's one of those troubling things where, a lot of the people at the time, in those days, there were less restrictions on people, and people weren't as, people were more closed-minded about the effects of certain kinds of behavior on others. And there was no, some certain people just felt like, I'm a star, I can do whatever I want. And, anybody will let me do whatever I want because I'm Bob Hope or whatever. And some people in those days were like that. And you always hear that there's certain people who weren't like that. You hear these wonderful stories about Marilyn Monroe and other people from the times, and people who, the Beatles, and, that they refused to play in clubs that didn't let Black people in, and things like that. There's good people in entertainment throughout history. And Bob Hope was probably mostly a decent person, but this sort of portrays him as one of those sort of jackass, chauvinistic guys. And I think Greg Kinnear's performance, to me, I didn't really buy. I didn't buy him as Bob Hope, and I would have thought he would have been a good Bob Hope because he has that kind of sense, that sort of, cynical vibe to him. I felt like he could have done a little bit more of an impersonation of Bob Hope with that, wow, the way he talks, but he did it a little bit, but he just wasn't Bob Hope. He didn't have Bob Hope's charisma. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, it was a little half-hearted. Like he didn't want it to seem too much like an impersonation, but then I feel like he didn't go far enough. I thought I actually wanted the movie to be a little deeper and more messagey than it was. I mean, it was more fun to watch not being that, but I feel like they kind of raised up the complexity of, the South African women being included in the pageant basically is just to ward off some kind of anti-apartheid protests that they were anticipating. Right. So they go, we'll have, if we show South African women in here, we won't look racist.
Well, they had to get a white woman and a Black woman from South Africa just to make, it was like they had one who was South African and the other one was Africa South or whatever.
That's right. And then also the fact that the feminists, the protest group was all white. So I feel like that was important too, because the women who are protesting what could possibly be this African woman's way out of, her underprivileged background, that she looked at it as her way out of that. It felt a little more complex. They kind of had that conversation, but I feel like it didn't really push that hard enough. And that to me was what made it, that whole protest and the feminist movement made it a little more gray. Like, yeah, it sucks that women are objectified, but a lot of times this is the only way some women can get out of where their bad situations, and I wish that had been played it a little harder on that, just a little bit.
But I think they sort of had to be a little bit easier on it because they didn't want to condemn all the women who have entered these contests, because it's like, if you condemn the system, then you're basically condemning the women who enter, because they're sort of, and at the end of the movie, which I thought was brilliant, was really cute and fun to see, was they had the actors, you know what? I don't want to give away the ending.
Yeah.
The ending was really beautiful. I'll put it that way. It was a really sweet ending.
Yes.
And
I agree.
Right.
It involves the idea that the women who were involved in the pageants, they had their reasons, and you can't blame them for being a part of this. Mm-hmm. And you can't say, well, if they're complicit because they were involved in it, they're women and yet they put themselves up on that stage in those bathing suits. There's that question, but then you have to realize it's like, they were, it's like you were just saying, it might be their only way out of their situation, and they're in a crappy situation in South Africa at the time.
Yeah. Well, and also, awful. The argument's made that why is this the only way out? And it all of a sudden it becomes deeper. It's like the only reason it's the only way out is because women have so many obstacles in their way.
Yeah.
That men don't face. So, again, I'm making it sound like it's no fun at all, but as you heard from the trailer, it's actually really fun.
Yeah, I'm going
to be all crabby about it.
It's important. It's an important subject matter, but I think it was handled, there's quibbles here and there. Sure. It's certainly not a perfect movie, but I thought it was very fun.
Very fun. Really well done.
and something, a story that I knew nothing about. So I had no idea this happened. So to me, that's, that gives it a movie worth seeing for me. So quibbles aside, and
I had heard about the situation.
Yeah.
And I'll say this about Greg Kinnear's performance. I understand what you're saying, that that's definitely not Bob Hope. It's like Greg Kinnear saying, okay, I'll put a fake nose on and sort of give just a little touch of Bob Hope. But that was probably a choice, I think. Much like, that Brian Wilson film that was had John Cusack playing. It was Paul Dano, who looks kind of like a young Brian Wilson. But then when I went to John Cusack, I go, that's not Brian Wilson. Doesn't look like Brian Wilson. Doesn't talk like Brian Wilson.
Yeah.
It was just his saying, I'm just going to be kind of like the feel of Brian Wilson.
Right. That makes sense.
I think that's kind of what Greg Kinnear was.
It was hard for me to get around the Brian Wilson thing, because you want to see, because Brian Wilson in those days had such a haunted look about him,
Yeah, he was pretty haunted.
He was haunted, and he looked just like a sad little boy sometimes, and that was part of the thing that Brian Wilson was, the person that he was his look, and John Cusack is this good looking guy that's, I guess, and he's like, that movie was weird to me, but in this movie, Greg Kinnear, he did a little bit of the Bob Hope thing. But I felt like I think what it was, maybe not so much I wanted him to be doing more of an impersonation of Bob Hope or to look more like him. I wanted to see the charisma of a superstar. And at the time, Bob Hope was a superstar. He was huge. To get Bob Hope on your show, and his persona in the film, he just sort of seems like some guy that walked in.
Well, I mean, technically, Wesley wasn't about Bob Hope.
Yeah,
I think he was more like a placeholder. I think it was okay to let him be kind of the sideshow and not the focus, because it would be really easy for the A-list actor playing a superstar, household name, would kind of overshadow the rest of the proceedings, which involved a lot of unknown actors too, besides Keira Knightley. So I think it was okay to sort of let him be kind of half their character, because, and it was kind of behind the scenes. It wasn't glamorous. He wasn't funny. He wasn't necessarily a pleasant person behind the scenes. I think that was also important to see. But, another thing, they just kind of glossed over probably a lot of abuse that was happening behind the scenes. It wasn't really going to be about that either.
Right.
And even though everybody had like their little chaperone that was there to follow them around, you can only imagine what that probably led to in some of those situations. So, but again, it's not about that. It's trying to be a more fun, entertaining film about a true story that happened, an actual disruption of the, in the 1970s Miss World pageant. And I think they did it, made it a kind of fun, farcical sort of, treatment of an important moment, but they didn't want it to be a downer. So I'm making it sound like a downer.
No, it's a good family film too. I think it's a film that it's good to watch with your kids and stuff. I think you'll get a lot of entertainment out of it. So
yeah, definitely.
I enjoy it.
Misbehavior. Who is the actor who played the stage director?
I think his name is Reese Ifans.
Yeah.
Reese. Is it Reese?
Reese Ifans, I guess. Ifans. Yes.
He was really good. I thought his performance was really fun. He was
fun.
Not a great guy, and but his performance was so entertaining, and and like you said before, Kathy, the hair and makeup and wardrobe was just spot on, and
so
this
fun
was
to watch,
really good. And that's rare. You would think that wardrobe and hair, and a lot of things that you see, period things that you see, there's a lot of conference room discussions about how far into period they want to go, because it becomes sort of unattractive at a certain point, because certain styles are not considered attractive anymore. So a lot of times producers are like, well, we still want our stars to be beautiful, and yet we still want them to look like they're from the 30s. And then the wardrobe people are like, well, let's put the eyebrows way up here on the forehead and they're like, no, that was cool in the 30s. So let's do, 2020 eyebrows, but 1930s, and in this one, I feel like they did 1970.
Right.
They did 1970 everything, and they got it. You feel like you're watching a movie that was made in 1970 almost.
That's hard to do
so well. Yeah.
It was well done.
So check it out, people.
Look for it.
off the beaten path for the usual Cinemondo, fare, but we like taking these tangents.
We like these tangents. We love Shout Factory. This is one of the best films they've probably put out this year, so it's definitely worth a look.
Gore level is 0 though. It gets a 0.
Yeah, there's no murder, which is a little disappointing. Yeah, I think you can find it on Amazon Prime if people want to make it easy for them. It's Amazon Prime, so you can find it there.
Yeah, so it's a good film.
And you can find us
at all your social media fun hotspots.
CinemondoPodcast.com. We have Facebook /Cinemondo podcast. We have, I always get confused because Twitter's the only weird one. We're at Cinemondo Pod. The pod.
Cinemondo
it sounds
Pod.
hip though. Cinemondo Pod.
Yeah.
Cinemondo
So
Pod.
look for us. Write to us. CinemondoPodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you guys.
Yes. Thanks for listening.
We do.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for listening, and check us out on all those things Kathy just said.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
See ya.
Cinemondo signing off.
Toodles.